we know that service can be a differentiator. This is a drum I've been banging. It's a personal. Maybe it's because my background is very service ingrained. Right back through to my days as a hospitality manager, through to being a quality services manager. I always believed that service can be the differentiator that separates us against our peers. And we've seen earlier that CSAT is becoming an increasingly important element in the growth strategies as well. Will those companies that continue to further invest in their effectiveness of their CSAT, do you see that? Do you think they'll gain a competitive advantage?
Absolutely, yeah. And look, this really comes down to really truly understanding your customers. Okay, so the term only manage what gets measured. You can collect a lot of data, you can run analysis on the data, you can come out with lots of charts and graphs that tells you various things about your organization, but as Danny said, managing the sentiment, understanding the customer is hugely important. But not just that, there's two sides to this, I think, Kris. Define what customer success looks like, or not customer success, but being fanatical about your customers. That's probably a term that I'd like to use. Understanding what does that look like? What are the pillars that, as an organization, we are going to manage? And CSAT may be part of that, NPS may be part of that, etc., etc. But then allow the system, the data, the understanding of the customer to then start to drive how those metrics are then derived at. But then it doesn't stop there. What it goes on to do is then becoming a data-driven business. It's to use those levers, using that sentiment, using that point in time to drive a process that either changes that trajectory of the customer's sentiment, whether it's a negative sentiment, you want to obviously change a positive, then you want to accelerate it. And it's being able to act in an agile way to ensure that the customers are feeling as though they're not just another number or a call in the contact center. They're actually a person that you have a temperature gauge. You understand what they're feeling. You understand that you've had to wait 2 or 3 hours or 24 hours for a washing machine to be repaired, or the boiler's broken down, or whatever it might be. Drive those. Don't wait until it's been fixed and then say, how was our service? Because unfortunately the response you're going to get is one of mixed or negative, because it's a challenging experience and you haven't necessarily helped to alleviate a lot of those stressful situations. So it's a really important element, because I think people walk with their feet. The ability to change from one provider to another. There's lots of companies that are in existence to support your switching from one utility company to another, insurance company to another, and so on and so forth. So as a customer, I have a variety of choices that I can make in terms of who my provider of certain services can be, and it's very easy to do that now, where previously it's very challenging. So therefore, organizations need to make the extra effort to really value me as a customer, help to understand my unspoken sentiment and challenges that I have, and almost be proactive in their elements to try and support me and do the best they can to ensure that I'm at least back onto an even keel or greater if that's possible.
Yeah, it's fascinating how it's the more we have this conversation, and like I said, one of the reasons I wanted to get you guys on board on the debrief was this kind of insight, because this whole conversation on it's very easy for us to look at CSAT as something that is delivered after the event of service, and I think that's the difference with sentiment analysis, is it takes in that whole service cycle. Dan, one final kind of question around this one. I'm still of two minds of whether, and this is often the way, whether we need to define the processes and understand the process and what we're trying to find out. I'm always a big fan of look, what is it that we want to know, and then work back from there. But do we need to redefine the process around this part of the conversation, before we can put the clever bits of AI or data analysis and everything else in, put the tech in? Or does the tech lead the conversation? Because in the past, I'd say it was always the other way around. But the technology's evolved so rapidly. We think back 5 years, and IoT was just about starting to kick in. I remember IoT dropping off the Gartner hype cycle because it just went, which has never happened before. It went from something at the top of the hype cycle to just it was a thing. Same with AI, same with big data analysis. Which is driving this conversation for you, Dan? Do we stick to the foundations and we go, right, let's get the processes first?
I don't think there's ever a right or wrong answer to that particular question. It's always on a case-by-case basis, and I think that's where an organisation like ourselves brings its value to the table, in the sense that we can look at the reorganisation of the processes and re-implementing them in different ways and helping support that journey, but also having a clear understanding of what the technology can do in terms of supporting that. And just from a point of view of being driven by technology, it absolutely can be, because obviously you've got the ability to capture that NPS score to give you that explicit, customer satisfaction that can start the journey. You can then obviously trigger off automations to enable you to understand, why the score was given the score that it was. As Danny mentioned, sentiment analysis is going to be a core element going forward. That ability in real time to understand the undertones and the patterns that are emerging from the conversations that you're having with your customers is critical. But as the number that terrified me the most was how low social media scored within the research, and I think I'm of a belief that out of all of the users of social media, you've got a large percentage of the population who are of a generation who don't use technology, but that number is forever shrinking. The number that is forever growing is the generation who are embracing things like social media. So it's only going to become more important. And the ability of something negative happening within that space that can then bleed into the mainstream is always a big threat. And I think the ability to spot those happening instantly, trigger off something that you as an organisation can step in and cut it off at that point and understand how you can turn a negative experience into a positive one for that particular person is going to play a major role for all organisations in the future. Yeah,
it's a really interesting point, actually. Going back to my days in service, we used to have the cost of a cost of a complaint many years ago, and it was very quantifiable, and you could see how that one complaint could escalate very, very, very quickly, and it would escalate beyond all measure. We also saw the value of turning that complaint around and holding on to that. And we would see that absolutely, once that complaint has gone and been resolved, they become the most loyal of customers. And again, there's quite a lot of data around that. But I think with social media, the problem is that cost of that complaint is no longer that voice of one person telling two people that tell three people. Suddenly, everybody has their own publishing platform for all intents and purposes. And what's the old adage? The bad news can travel halfway around the world before it gets caught and rectified. So I think it is a really interesting point that we kind of see there.
Absolutely, and just to really hit that point home, we recently did a masterclass in this space, and as part of that masterclass, I did some research in some figures that are widely available, and that in terms of positive and negative experiences, a person will only tell 9 people of a positive experience. They'll tell upwards of 16 for a negative experience. And I think that's really a number that people need to sit up and take notice of that sort of figure.